Hey, did you know that Hollywood's very first movie studio was a barn? Right here. Yeah. Right here. But it ended up here, right next to the Avalon here in Hollywood. And do you know where that barn is today? Because that is the purpose of today's adventure. Today we are visiting the Hollywood Heritage Museum, the very first Hollywood movie studio. And I'm coming to you again from Franklin Village. This is my hood. I want to welcome you, and I want to remind you that if this is something that interests you and you think it might interest your friends, please share it. Click that share button, leave a comment, and do me a favor right now. Pause the video, go ahead, subscribe to this channel, and click the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, click that thumbs up, give me a like. I appreciate every bit of support you can give. Today is a little sound check of this microphone, which comes to me from one of my Patreon sponsors. And I want to mention the video, which should come up right about there. I don't know, how does it sound? So it's pretty early here in Hollywood. Doing a little sound check, like I said. We've got the freeway behind me. On the other side of that wall, I did a video about that wall. I did a little visit when they dedicated that wall. We're moving up Tamarind. Why? Why? Because you know me. I want to tell you about connections to things that we drive past, walk past every day. And here we are, right next to the Avalon here in Hollywood. The Palace. I know. It's just a parking lot. So let's start right there at the Avalon. The Palace, right? Right? I remember the Palace. Oingo Boingo played the Palace. Actually, it has previously been known as the Hollywood Playhouse, the WPA Federal Theater, El Capitan Theater, the Jerry Lewis Theater, the Hollywood Palace, and the Palace. But this is where our adventure begins. Now, I'll be showing some very rough footage I was given permission to catch.
In 1901, land baron, financier Colonel Robert Northam purchased almost 15 acres here. 5 acres across the street from Deida Wilcox, Beveridge, and 9 acres from Miss Hamrick on this side.
And the chance to visit with some of the amazing people who saved this piece of very real California's gold. Seated left to right, Richard Adkins, Fran Offenhauser, and Christy McAvoy, 3 of the founders of Hollywood Heritage. One of the founders of Paramount Pictures was Cecil B. DeMille, whose star is right here. Where I've been standing for 3 days. Made his very first movie in a barn. In association with Jesse Lasky, he leased the barn and studio facilities for $250 a month, establishing the Jesse L. Lasky Feature Play Company, and began production of The Squaw Man, which was released in 1914, the first feature film to be produced in the Hollywood area.
In 1918, the little barn was a survivor, surviving a fire which engulfed the lab, which was connected to the barn and most of the back production facility.
I think the old girl looks pretty good. What do you think? Within 3 years, they acquired the entire block between Selma and Sunset on which the barn was located. It was transformed into a small property room, and the business offices were moved into a new administration building, which extended practically the length of the entire block, facing Vine Street. That's probably when it looked like this. Standing out here in the middle of the street to get this shot. Beginning with a total staff of 15, just 3 years after The Squaw Man was completed, the Lasky Company now had nearly 1,000 on its weekly payroll.
Realized they needed space, and so purchased several acres from United Studios and moved to this location off of Marathon.
At the time, there were no plans on what to do with the old lot. But Lasky was sentimental about the old barn and the studio's beginnings, so he had it picked up and trundled over to the new location. In addition, the window frame that he used to gaze out from was removed and placed in his new private office. So, yes, in 1926, the barn was moved to the back lot of United Studios, present-day Paramount Studios.
And on December 27, 1956, here on the porch of the little barn, it was dedicated as California Historic Landmark number 554, recognized as the first Hollywood film studio. And at that time, it was the only original film studio that still stood. So what had been Robert Orphan's little barn is now not only the Paramount Studio gym and film location, but also an historic landmark. So after the filming of the B-roll for the Ten Commandments in 1956, the barn was moved to the western backlot, and they had constructed a little western town. There were, it looked like a street with a saloon, the barn, other kinds of western things, that a lot of their 50s and early 60s westerns were filmed here. The barn appears in the background of several of the 1950s and 60s westerns, particularly those that were filmed by producer A.C. Lyles.
Is that where it's coming? Yeah, that's it. Look at the water tower. Get a light on. Get a light on that white flame!
Huh. Yeah, apparently the barn was a gym for many, many years, which is why it still retains this white paint job today. Oh, hi, Bill.
In the 1970s, the little Lasky Mill barn once again threatened demolition when Paramount Studios needed more space on which to expand its production facilities.
But fortunately, they did save that barn and they moved it again. I've been out here for a couple days trying to catch a time-lapse shot because If you could see that arrow right there, that's just about where, if history had not stepped in, this could have been the final resting place of that very, very famous barn.
Hollywood Chamber of Commerce President Jack Foreman helped organize its subsidiary, Hollywood Historic Trust. Took over the barn from Paramount Studios. It was moved to this parking lot adjacent to the Palace Theater.
Right here, across the street from the Capitol Records building.
When owner Dennis Lipsky graciously allowed it to be moved here.
A parking lot which could have been the last resting place of a barn where Hollywood was born. The very first Hollywood studio. Here in the shadow of the Capitol Records building. So, that's how it ended up here. At the bottom of the hill on Vine, leading into Hollywood. The Hollywood Chamber of Commerce moved it to the parking lot of the Hollywood Palace Theater, where it was boarded up and fenced in until a permanent site could be found. Now, when Jack Haley Jr. wanted to film a television special at the Palace, he asked that the barn be moved. They thought about moving it to Universal. Meanwhile, Marion Gibbons, a member of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce,
Francis, we have to do this. We have to do something. They're going to take the Paramount barn to Universal.
and the founder of Hollywood Heritage asked that her organization be allowed to provide the barn with a permanent home.
Marion had strong-armed everyone.
So many people gave.
Well, at that time, a newly formed historic organization by the name of Hollywood Heritage stepped in.
I didn't know what Marion was talking about when she called me. Barn? What barn? And so she said, meet me at that address. And for some reason, I don't remember walking through that door, but getting to the doorway to this room, I don't have words to express it. And it was, here I stand, I cannot do otherwise. It was so moving to be here. And that's the moment I always remember. From here.
It recognized the historic importance of the little barn and decided to make it a museum. With the help of former Los Angeles County Board of Supervisor John Anson Ford and the current supervisor Edmund Edelman, they found it a permanent home in what is now Lot D of the Hollywood Bowl parking lot at 2100 North Highland. At this location in the 1950s, LA County had thought about building a huge movie museum, and they had demolished homes to start construction, but due to scandal and financial mismanagement, the museum is never built.
But it's time for me to step aside and let these people tell their own stories.
The full story of the planned County Film Museum at the site is a tragedy of epic proportions. Renowned architect William Perrott was hired to design an elaborate museum to house tributes to both film and television, before the county allowed it to spiral out of control and become a place to honor radio and recording as well. Massive fundraising was required in order to build such a gigantic project, one which required residents to be removed from their homes sitting on the planned site. 15 homeowners gave in to the county and accepted eminent domain, but ex-Marine and Barney's Beanery bartender Stephen Anthony would have none of it. He and his lawyer fought for over 2 years in court to save his home, 6655 Alta Loma Terrace, which had been built by cinematographer and feature Broadway producer Gordon Pollack. In the early 1930s, actress Betty Davis leased the home when she first moved to Hollywood. Anthony and his lawyer fought valiantly to save the home that both Pollack, his landlord, and Anthony himself loved, but they were denied each time. Finally, the county took him to court to force his removal. Anthony barricaded himself, wife Alona, and 3 children from 5 months to 2.5 years in the home, which he dubbed Fort Anthony, along with a 12-gauge shotgun. The siege of Fort Anthony began. The county had originally planned to storm the house after releasing tear gas and forced their way inside, but had to give up the plan with the family camped in the house and the press sitting outside televising it live to the public. After the California Supreme Court turned away Anthony's claim against the county's eviction, the wait was on. The 36th Academy Award telecast on Monday, April 13, 1964, saw Sidney Poitier become the first African American to win the Best Actor Oscar for his performance in Lilies of the Field. That very same night, the county pulled a dirty trick, using 2 men to impersonate Anthony's supporters and trick their way into the home, where they seized Anthony and hauled him away to jail. The county sheriff and deputies emptied the house and the Anthony belongings overnight, and the next day bulldozers moved in and demolition began. Anthony's supporters later built a shrine to the family and the home at its former location. After spending over $2.5 million and 5 years trying to get the film museum off the ground, the siege of Fort Anthony scandal forced the county to pull the plug. The land under the Anthony's home became a picnic area, and the land under other homes became a parking lot. Anthony spent 6 months in jail before the family moved to Northern California. Although returning to the property where his home once stood brought back painful memories, Anthony soon became an active part of the Hollywood Heritage Museum project in the mid-1980s and joined with the volunteers who were restoring the building.
I apologize for the lackluster audio in this video, but I do hope you'll use your subtitles, and I do hope you'll leave a comment if you've ever been to this amazing museum brought to us by these amazing people.
I have a similar moment to that just said you're standing in, one of the oldest buildings in this community that changed the course of what Hollywood was like, and that when you walk in here, it was a barn, it was a stable, and then it was all that part of the motion picture industry. But the other moment that I have is the one where when the barn was in the parking lot, and the volunteer paint scraping parties that we used to have. And I probably shouldn't tell the story because that probably means I'm a really bad mother, because God knows what was in that paint as we were all scraping it off the building. But my 7-year-old daughter was part of those painting parties, and watching the 25 volunteers all at one time, all doing their little things with children and people of all ages contributing to getting the paint off the barn, getting it ready to move. That's probably why.
So this was land on which a museum was supposed to stand, and Hollywood Heritage had a museum which needed a home. So it was the perfect solution for both. On February 15, 1983, the barn began its tour to end up at its current home.
Traffic lights, the wires, etc., etc. And the brilliance again of Marion Gibbons was she must have made a similar call to the board of engineering board
And to the mayor.
And to the mayor, and we moved the barn on the 11 o'clock news live. Wow. That was Marion work with us on the double-decker bus. With us on the bus.
We had to go south on Vine, west on Sunset, and north on Highland. Like Just pick the busiest streets.
Well, and that other route would have had us going very, very far up a steep hill on Vine.
Moving down Vine Street past its original location at Selma and Vine, down Sunset and up Highland, and it arrived during the LA 11 o'clock news so that it gained maximum publicity exposure. Hollywood Heritage members and supporters traveled in the double-decker bus behind it, and also it was accompanied by a marching band celebrating the historic barn's successful trek to its new home. Little did Colonel Robert Northam know in 1901, when he built this little barn, that it would become such an iconic part of Hollywood history. It was the nucleus around which Paramount Studios is built, and which legendary director Cecil DeMille shot his first film. It's the last remaining relic of Hollywood's early agricultural period before it became a major film industry. It really can be said that a little barn started it all. And it's a story of preservation and perseverance as well, because this little barn has survived fires, possible demolition, and negligence to become a Hollywood Heritage Museum. It's because of champions throughout its history who have saved it by either moving it or adapting it for other uses. The Alaska DeMille Barn became known as the Hollywood Studio Museum when it opened as a museum December 13, 1985, educating the community on both Hollywood as a city and as an industry.
So that brings us to today. The next time you come down this off-ramp off the 101, maybe you're going to the Hollywood Bowl, maybe you're going home and you drive past this little barn. The little barn that could. You'll know how it got here. I want to thank our guests, Richard Adkins, Fran Offenhauser, Christy McAvoy, and Mary Mallory for her amazing documentary, On the Move, the Lasky DeMille Barn's Journey. Please like this video. Remember, every like is like a ray of light straight to my heart. If this is the kind of content that you like, please share it with a friend. Well, we're not going to go inside today, but I will return in the future with a friend. Maybe you. If you'd like to take a look at some more of my adventures in and around Hollywood, please check out one of these videos. Ooh, I like that intolerance video. Gotta do an update on that one.